Hello everybody, hope you're doing really well. Today I have been given very special access to visit a air raid shelter in Worthing, and we're talking about St Botolph's church, which is technically in West Worthing, but I suppose you're just going to have to wait for all that and then I can tell you a bit more about the history, but more importantly stay with me because I think you're going to really like this one. Come on, let's go. Hello and welcome back. So before we go inside and explore the air raid shelter, which is literally behind me, I just thought I'd just give a bit of context. So we're in Worthing at St Botolph's church. Originally it was an 11th century church, so sort of Norman period, but obviously what you can see now is this sort of 19th century church, which obviously is absolutely beautiful and really fitting for the area of obviously the Worthing, Brighton, Shoreham area, I suppose, Sussex coastline. But what's really unusual is that normally when we explore these types of places, we've normally noted in the past that air raid shelters within churches normally been in the crypt. Now what makes this one really special and a little bit different is that the air raid shelter is actually outside of the church itself, just here. And that's what makes it really unusual, because obviously we've seen before when we've gone to London, for example, that most of the crypts have been repurposed into air raid shelters, and it wasn't uncommon for that to sort of happen. Also gave it quite a communal sort of feel. In this instance, the air raid shelter is a purpose-built air raid shelter that's literally just outside of the church. So it's kind of strange, but kind of really unique and interesting at the same time. I say unique, it's not uncommon, but these types of places are more rarer than the actual ones that you normally see that would be repurposed into crypts. So like I said, I'm really lucky today to have access to go inside and actually check it out for myself. Be interested to see what the conditions like as well, and yeah, I suppose the most important thing is that we actually go in there and have a look. So let's do it, come on. So hello and welcome back. Thank you so much for staying with me. I've got to say, we've just opened this up for probably the first time in many years actually. So much so that at one point we got confused with what keys open what, because it just hasn't been open in a long time. I've lucky enough parked close enough that I knew which torch I wanted to take with me, and I'm not going to lie, this air raid shelter has got a lot of hidden secrets which I want to sort of mention to you. And what also adds to that is that it's going to add to the church's history. So I'm really grateful that today's video is going to really help the church out with my knowledge and everything else, and my sort of love of this sort of like type of history. And what we're going to first discuss is we've come into what looks like double doors, and if I show you, this section of the air raid shelter has been used for storage, as you can imagine, and we've literally spent, I'm not joking, about a good solid 5 minutes in each one clearing out the cobwebs, and there still are quite a hefty few here. Now, first things first, I just want to sort of, if I rest this here, you can see that this would have had two main entrances. One, Finger of Doom, you can see the recess there. And then as you come in, I can't get any closer, I'm afraid, on this one, but we can like copy and paste it for the one next doors. You see where that drain pipe is? Originally, there would have been a wall that would have come out, and that would have been our toilet cubicle. Now, I know that because when we looked at the other one, it's the mirror image of it. So in other words, there's two separate air raid shelters on this surface air raid shelter. So I need to make that very clear for people. This is a surface air raid shelter, if you didn't know already. You can see these little vents that are pretty much running the length of the shelter. We know roughly that it was probably built sort of 1939, sort of just after maybe 1940. There's not much on the records that we found that gives us a clear indication that I've found so far. It doesn't mean that there isn't anything out there. As I mentioned to you before, what makes this really interesting, the church doesn't have a crypt necessarily. It has a small underground section which, you know, for the purpose of what we're talking about, this is one of the main fundamental reasons why this air raid shelter was built. Because the church didn't have a crypt and it needed a local communal sort of shelter within the small vicinity, which is actually quite a busy area of Worthing. And this is it. Now, there's many other air raid shelters that are in Worthing. A lot of them have gone. A lot of the, as you can imagine, Worthing is going under a state, as per usual with most places, of lots of new buildings and obviously demolition of old ones. So it's rare that we even see something like this. In fact, actually, the only other notable one is there is a notable, quite semi-large civilian air raid shelter within Worthing that I may discuss at some other point. But for today, this really is rare. As we noted before, we can see our amazing concrete capping that goes across, and then our bricks that just basically reinforce what the walls are. So not the thickest you're ever going to see, but however an important place. Very similar to, well, pretty much identical to what we'd sort of see as surface air raid shelters for schools. Again, all within this vicinity is used for storage, and it's been it's just such a privilege to have access to this. So this is the first side, like I said, that is the sort of least accessible side. Now what I want to try and do now is I'd like to take you outside and show you the outside, and then we're going to go into the other one, because I promise you there is an amazing piece of history within that. Two pieces, I suppose, and I'm really excited to show you those. And I remember the moment we opened that door, they were literally littered with cobwebs straight away, and we knew that nobody had been in there for a very long time, and you'll probably notice that when you go in there. So really excited to show you that, but let's go out and let's continue this story of this wonderful air raid shelter. Come on. Right, so as you can see, we're now outside, and just before, I just want to mention this. Beautiful, I think they reckon it's the 12th century ruins, a little bit later, and then obviously they've redeveloped the church here, but gorgeous little ruin. I will take you to that in a minute and talk about that. The font is still there, can you believe that? But we are here today to predominantly look at this air raid shelter. So as you can see, as we mentioned before, it's this beautiful brick air raid shelter with I was going to say civilian air raid shelter, but obviously civil. Concrete capping on top, beautiful brick foundation, lovely long rectangular structure. I mean, it is actually in remarkable condition. Now, here is our blast shelter wall technically, and you've got a picture as well that here at some point, it's quite common they probably would have put sandbags to reinforce this. So what you're looking at, even though it's a sort of blast protective wall, really you've got sandbags that are here. And what you've got to also imagine, if there was a bomb, I mean, that ruin predates this. So you've got maybe an extra layer of protection, but you've also got the worrying nature of that actually falling on top. So it's quite more than likely it would have had a lot of sandbags placed around this area. But again, we've seen that in a lot of air raid shelters. So I'm just going to carefully just manoeuvre my way around. Now, like we said before, this is concreted up, which is the entrance on this one. And then on that one, that's been sort of, it's got wooden, looks like it's wooden panelling. I didn't take a proper look at that. Amazing shelter. I mean, really beautiful. And we can take a look at these little air vents that have been covered in spiders' webs. I'm going to show as much respect as possible when coming around here. But yeah, look at this. What an amazing... sorry for saying amazing too much. But what a piece of history. Really is incredible. So like I said, so we've got two entrances, left and right there. Now, this is the other thing I want to talk about whilst we're here. It's quite possible, from what we've just looked at, that these double doors, as you can probably imagine, didn't exist. And that this was a later addition to obviously repurpose it as storage. And one of our biggest indicators isn't, funny enough, the side wall. It's actually the floor. The floor here is similar to the bricks, but it's very, very uneven. And it just feels like at one point, what you're looking at probably wasn't in situ, and that they've probably, obviously we know that, I mean, obviously, let's just say this is obvious. I mean, these are wooden sort of rough sketch doors. I mean, they wouldn't have been around there at the time. So what you've got to imagine is it's quite possible that probably would have continued along that brick wall. It's possible there might have been another entrance, but what really concerns me that it isn't is when you look at the floor, it's very uneven. And in fact, if you look at the original concrete flooring based around the church, there's a little dip. It's actually more prominent actually if you're here, and also on the raised section of that concrete. In other words, it's not as level as you want it to be. So really, it should have probably stacked up. And actually, if you probably look inside, might be better to look from the outside. The wall on here just seems to be a lot more modern. The coloration of that concrete doesn't seem to sort of match with the other section as well. It'd probably be a lot darker by this point. It's still got a light tan to it. I could be wrong, and I hold my hands up if I am, but it was only through the foundations that suggested that actually what we're looking at really wasn't probably part of the original part of this, and it probably just would have mirrored the opposite side, which is really what I'm going to take you to. So let's have a look at the opposite side. Come on. Okay, so before we sort of look at the rest of the area chapter, I did sort of mention really like to sort of focus on this ruin that stands behind us, because we love a good ruin on this channel, don't we? But what's fascinating about this is that they reckon this was a 12th century ruin of the church. Now, as I sort of mentioned at the beginning, we said that it was originally predates to 11th century, so Norman times. So this is what blows me away. That is the original font. Can you believe that? Now, when we talk about history, does it honestly get any better than that? That the original font is still here, and it just lies within the original ruin of this church. It's really not hard to imagine how beautiful this is. And it's kind of crazy to think that just behind this is the air raid shelter. So much history. What a beautiful place, what a beautiful church. Like I said, I'm very, very lucky to explore this place and document it for the church, more importantly. But there we go. Yeah, look at the font. Can you believe that? Within the ruin of the 12th century section. So when they were rebuilding this, in the sort of Victorian times, what they decided was, for whatever reason, that they probably just decided that they felt that they wanted to leave this section here as a reminder of the original church's past. So, yeah. And I'm sure this could all be part of a separate video that I may or may not come back to in the future, because it's a nice touch to have sometimes when you see the original ruins of the older church situated within the grounds of the more newer church. And I've got to admit, when you're in there, by the way, it's absolutely beautiful in there. So, but we came here to see the air raid shelter, so let's carry on. Come on. Lots of spiders' webs. So we've now made it inside, and as you can tell, this side is radically different, or you will be able to see it in a minute when I show you. But when we open it up, there are still a lot of cobwebs behind us and in front. We sort of created a path so that when I'm filming, I don't have to sort of unnecessarily have to touch anything I don't need to. So yeah. What do you think out there? It's pretty good so far, isn't it? But let's show you the really cool stuff. So one bit's there and another bit's behind you. So I won't keep you in suspense. Let's go have a look. Okay, so the first thing that we found was this, which sort of blew me away, to be fair, and we're still trying to work it out. It says freedom of worship, freedom from fear, freedom from want, freedom from, not sure what that one says, but you can see that it's been placed into a plastic wallet, but it looks like it dates from the period. And it wouldn't be a surprise, being a church, that they would have maybe posters or stuff like this to keep the morale up of the people who were obviously in these shelters. And maybe it's probably one of the reasons why this was placed here, to sort of give that, so that when you're in a place like this, you know, it just gives you that little bit of safety and security. Now, I've never seen anything like that in a place like this, but it looks like it dates to it. I mean, I'm almost certain it does. I mean, I can always be wrong. I totally accept that, but it just looks right, doesn't it? I mean, the way the gentleman's dressed. Isn't that just fantastic? Even if it's later, the point that that exists is still fascinating in itself. I'm trying to give you a good angle here, because there are a lot, like I said, there's a lot of spiders' webs, and the last thing I want to do is try and, there you go, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Yeah, well, and there's our entrance, or our exit. Actually, in this instance, our entrance is over there. So that's where I'm going to take you next. Let's go. Right, so I wondered if you noticed it when we had a quick look, but there are two doors here. And you know what that means when you're looking at this? That's a toilet. Can you believe that? And it's more of a fancy one, which makes it even more special, because as we know, sometimes you would have just had a courtesy blanket. We've seen these on many shelters, so if you're still first time, normally you'd have what they would have, like a courtesy blanket that would sort of drape over the top, and then just a little chemical toilet in which you'd go. Now, I'm only going to go so far, because as you can see, it's completely covered in cobwebs. But that's our toilet, and that is our latches, and you look at the rust on that, and yet the door is perfect condition. I can open that and shut that at will. Now, you notice that there's another one, which means that that was the other one that mirrored onto the opposite side. Now, the only difference with that was, as I sort of mentioned, as we noticed, that that toilet on that side isn't there anymore. So what we're looking at on the other one is that that wall isn't on the one opposite. And there's our other entrance, so we can get closer to this. But what makes that really strange is that they've placed the other door from the other toilet in here instead of leaving it next doors. But we know that that's actually being used as more of a sort of shed now than anything else. But still, I mean, even that shed next doors is, you know, it's just such a special place. This also, there's no holes or anything to suggest that there would have been benches. So look at this. You see these chairs? Now, it's quite a high probability that these chairs are actually the things that were actually used in this shelter, and they're numbered. There's an 8 and there's a 6. There is a number on that, but I cannot see that. What was that? There's an 8 and a 6. That looks like another 8 maybe. Can't be another 8, but it looks very similar. Could be a 5. There's some old gates in here as well, but as you can see, this is just an amazing piece of history where you look. So yeah, these would probably be the chairs that they would have sat on in the shelter, because as I said before, there's nothing to suggest that there would have been any benches that would have been placed in here. normally you'd see on the floor some sort of indication that there would have been some to have like a, try to describe this to people, there would have been like a long wooden bench that would have stretched. But on this instance, I think these are the original chairs. It's almost like a time capsule. So incredible to imagine. So there we go, there's our other shelter. Does it honestly get any better than this? With the original toilet in here, with the door that still opens. I'll just do it one more time. As always mentioned before, it's rare that I'm ever going to get opportunities like this, so I should take full advantage of it. And even though it's covered in cobwebs, the fact that this is still here. So again, and it makes sense, as we always find when we have our entrances, that the toilets are normally right next to the entrances, and then sometimes, or more than likely, you'd have an escape hatch. Not necessarily sure about this one. Ducking and weaving to make sure I avoid any cobwebs. This again looks fairly modern, but there's every chance on this one, because if you look, as I mentioned to you before, if you look at the brickwork on that with the concrete, I mean, this could be an escape hatch. Well, sorry, I keep saying escape hatch, and I don't actually mean escape hatch. Let's just sort of say secondary exit or entrance for the purpose of this. But yeah, remarkable. And then that poster as well. What a remarkable piece of history. I didn't, honestly, when I came here today, I didn't realise how incredible this place was going to be and how much of a sort of semi-time capsule it was. And not only that, the privilege that I've even had to check this place out. And it really has been such a privilege. So let's just go outside and say goodbye to this wonderful piece of history. And hopefully we've done a very good job of documenting this. Just to point out the vent holes again, the ventilation little holes. Yeah, amazing. Let's go out and summarise. Come on. Well, wasn't that a treat? I am so lucky to have these amazing opportunities and access to explore these remarkable places, knowing that nobody's ever documented this, and it's another one to sort of say for everybody out there who's watching, you know, there's history everywhere. World War II, 12th century, that's just there, and even in these churches that significantly are just such a communal hub for a lot of people. And you can imagine in World War II, a place like this, an air raid shelter, would have been such a vital thing for the community, just to raise their spirits, so that they knew that there was a safe place potentially that they could have come to in the threat of Germans obviously bombing these coastal towns, which we've obviously mentioned to in the past. I just want to say a massive thank you to Peter, who's allowed me special access for today. He's been such a kind person for really just giving me the access, but more importantly, letting me have the opportunity to film it and document it. So a special mention to him, because obviously he's done such an amazing job on this church, and obviously his enthusiasm for obviously wanting to understand more about this place really shines through when I speak to him. So I just want to say a huge thank you to him as well. Also, the other thing is, like I said before, there's not much history on this shelter, so obviously some of the stuff I was using from previous experience on air raid shelters, that doesn't mean that I'm always going to be right, but I've got a fairly good inkling on this one that most of this is just about right. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. Feel free to spread the word of the channel. Much love to all of you out there. In the immortal words of Phoenix history, because history matters, and doesn't it just on a place like this? This place really surprised me. Normally you know what to expect, but this place really surprised me. And like I said, to see this long rectangular area shelter in the condition that it's in, which is actually relatively good under the circumstances, and to see a few hidden little things in there, such as the original toilet doors that would have been located in there. Like I said, even interesting enough to see them, and obviously for one of them to operate, we know that the other air raid shelter's door is in this side. And obviously that wall that would have divided the toilet, etc., isn't there? You've seen that. But what an incredible, I mean, really incredible World War II piece of history, especially for the Sussex area and especially for the Worthing area, more importantly. So any more words of Phoenix history, as I said before, because history matters, and it really does. And I'll see you all very soon. Feel free to spread the word of the channel, if you'd like to, of course. Much love to all of you out there, and thank you so much for watching this, and I really hope you enjoyed it, just as much as I enjoyed filming it. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you all very soon. Ready? Come on then. Kapow. Take care.